Life is what you make it. So what are you making? Healthier choices? New friends? New beginnings? Whatever you're making in life, make it matter together with LA Care Health Plan. Healthcare starts at $0.
Struggling to make ends meet in these uncertain times? You're not alone. Becoming a notary public is a quick, low-cost way to earn extra money. Notaries can make up to $150 per appointment just by stamping documents like contracts and home loans. For only $39, EasyNotaryClass.com gives you everything you need to get certified, plus a free loan signing certification class to boost your earnings. Visit EasyNotaryClass.com today and start your own notary business for just $39. That's the letter E, the letter Z, NotaryClass.com.
Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. Today's show, I have a very special guest, a returning guest. His name is Austin Picard. He operates the Underclass podcast. I had him on originally to talk about the Solar Temple. That was a very well received, very much commented on episode we did, and we just talked last week. And we covered a number of different topics. Some people don't know about the Hosanna Church scandal that True Detective was kind of based on or influenced by. And so that was something we talked about out of Louisiana. Really dark. That's super dark. And then also we covered Pilgrim Society, a little bit of Mind War, which is kind of ties into today's topic. I was looking through his catalog on his very well-researched episodes on his podcast and came across Mockingbird. I haven't done a show on that. And something kind of strange happened because when we set up this date, the 25th, to talk about it, I hadn't come across this other book that came across my desk, which was one I just talked about today, Twilight of the Shadow Government. And sometimes I don't know what's inside of these books. Well, then I started reading through Kevin Shipp's book, and it's all about Mockingbird. So I did a primer on Mockingbird, reading his book to come up to today's discussion about Mockingbird. And I really probably should have made a title that was more detailed, because it's Mockingbird leading up to today. Like this is an operation that was exposed in the 70s, but like we're here at 2024 and we're being just blasted like blizzard style propaganda from all angles these days, and operatives at all levels. People are being exposed and strange things are happening, but we're going to talk more about that. So Austin, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, William.
Awesome.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, for people who hadn't heard your name, maybe you can talk about your research and what got you started. I was listening to your episode on the Underclass today on, I think, Podbean, and maybe you can just talk about why you got interested in the research you did for that.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I just cannot stand being lied to, and once you sort of cut through the official narratives that kind of represent this false paradigm and really reinforce this veil of propaganda, and it constructs this false sense of reality that obscures any sort of critical thinking, any sort of just cognitive skills to be able to assess for yourself credibility of certain things, just to have original thoughts in general. And I very much kind of naturally bucked the system, and I sort of thank God for that. I don't know why I inherently kind of rejected authority in many ways, but I sort of had that baked in, instinctually within myself. For some reason, I sort of think that most people kind of naturally have this sort of individualistic nature that should be, utilized and at least people should attempt to guide you in that proper direction, right? And instead, it seems to be entirely driven out of you through the system of the Prussian model of public school education, and, as we know, the social engineering aspect of society itself, which is very much in sort of that vein of the Tavistock Institute and the Frankfurt School, and all these different methods that basically lead up to what Mockingbird became. And so for me, once I discovered, I started trying to, explain things for myself, what principles I truly believed in. I wanted to outline them myself. I wanted to understand the moral principles I claimed to uphold. And so once I went down that path of questioning my own belief system and the ideology I claimed to embrace, I realized just how many kind of, just absolute fallacies were involved with, right, with just logical fallacies, just not even in regard to economics or just the basic fundamental right, like pillars of society itself. Just, it's so much more than that. It's this institutionalized deception, and it's something that it really just it affects me to my core, and it's something that I kind of had to dedicate my life toward, is discovering the truth, seeking the truth in an objective manner. And I somehow, was able to question my ideas enough to kind of get to that place where I was finally able to objectively seek the truth and ask the proper questions. And I'm still attempting to maintain an open mind at all times. And I feel like, if you're open and willing to being wrong about things, then usually you're not as vulnerable and you're not running that risk as often as it very much seems like the average person is, which, I witnessed that on a daily basis with my own family and my own friends and people that I very much love and appreciate and only want the best for. But society as it's constructed sort of has the majority of people fighting against their own best interest, right? And they truly believe that, their intentions are pure and ethical and moral. They don't it's at least the average person. I don't believe it's malicious intent, right? I think it's more they've been deceived at a level that they can't quite comprehend. And so that is why I've essentially dedicated the vast majority of my time to trying to find the narratives that make more sense, that seem more plausible to me, and provide more credible evidence than that of the official narrative, and seem to counteract the official line in more ways than one. And so, yeah, it's really kind of led me into a direction that I never imagined I would take. I was very much just kind of converted to be philosophically opposed to the state in many ways. Again, I just don't feel like it's my right or my duty to control my neighbor in any sense of right. And
right,
so
you have a libertarian sensibility, individualist,
very much.
libertarianist, I guess, or
Yes.
term, whatever those terms mean. But like the state is huge now. The state is everything, all encompassing, and this Operation Mockingbird is part of it. Like it's very profound. Like there was another book called The Mighty Wurlitzer that was put out because they thought the Wurlitzer is like the big organ, right? They had in the movie theaters, because that's how they can create social engineering, fake public consensus, owning these different media guys. So then, like, that's the whole thing. If they did like the Milgram experiment, right? And these different experiments are all allegedly funded with CIA funds, by the way, are very important because it just shows there's that one line experience where if five guys say this line is smaller than the other, the sixth guy will just agree with that. And so they facilitate and made that. They operationalize that sociological study through the Grand Wurlitzer and Operation Mockingbird. That's how profound it is. So when somebody like you says, I had a rejection against the state, it might even be more philosophically profound than that, because you're rejecting this artificial culture and intellectual creation from an organization that doesn't have your best interest involved at all.
Absolutely.
If they're running the state, if the CIA is the fourth branch of government running the other three branches, we need to find out about the CIA and what it's up to, because I don't think it doesn't. Yeah. So, I mean, we can get like, I mentioned at the intro of this book, they're talking about Dulles running drugs, mind control stuff, MK Ultra. Like this is all tied into each other.
Absolutely.
You want to come over? I just stopped the camera.
Sounds good. And what it's just, a landscape littered with spooks and mind manipulators, and it's something that I've realized is that essentially the key role of the Mockingbird media, that's basically fulfilled by the Mockingbird media, is to amplify and repeat without skepticism, right? And I heard this German journalist, he put it in the terms of, essentially, like, establishment journalists are largely educated and indoctrinated to lie and betray the public trust. And so there is a reason public trust is at an all-time low. And even the herd marching in lockstep can sort of sense that something is wrong, right? And so you have this kind of
Life is what you make it. So what are you making? Healthier choices? New friends? New beginnings? Whatever you're making in life, make it matter together with LA Care Health Plan. Healthcare starts at $0.
Los Angeles International Airport is offering tips for a personalized travel experience at LAX this fall. Try to arrive at least 2 hours before domestic flights and 3 hours before international flights. You can pre-book parking ahead of time online. Before taking off, travelers can place mobile orders for a variety of concessions offering the flavors of LA. Stay connected at workspaces with power outlets and Wi-Fi, or find inspiration from LAX's public art programs. Learn more at flylax.com. That's flylax.com.
reaction to it all, and you see the death of mainstream media in many ways, but then people are under this false impression that Mockingbird somehow ended when public transparency effectively took place during the church committee hearings, and it's just not at all the case. And especially, we'll get into that in a little more detail, but I think that unfortunately, many of them are frantically kind of turning to these various false prophets that we had just kind of spoken about privately, and these disinformation operatives that seem to be oversaturating that very sort of this new alternative media landscape that has formed now in sort of the new age. And so essentially these I would say the average person is, they're seemingly being psychologically corralled once again, just in this newly adapted form of Mockingbird, which has, basically conformed to meet the new standards of this fifth generation information warfare, and its environment, the environment we find ourselves in at this very moment. And so, again, wielding the very Tavistock methods that of social engineering and deceptively creating culture using Hollywood as a tool, which we have plenty of examples of that. But it's clearly a covert policy of demoralization, right? And intended to demoralize, but also distract us, I would say. And so it's almost a clandestine manipulation of reality itself. And I think that that's what we should, at least that's very much my impression here, and the way I approach Mockingbird, because it's meant to obfuscate the true intentions of our ruling class. And these are oligarchs, ruling oligarchs, they're dynastic families, they despise us. We cannot relate to these people, right? It's a class of society, a sect of society. I think we're so far from even being able to honestly relate to them, right, as human beings, that it's almost just, it really is kind of terrifying in many ways, right? Because of how much power they wield, right?
A picture of Dulles is perfect. I mean, this guy, it's an operator, Sullivan and Cromwell, just never mix with people. This is a guy who was just a real monster. I mean, we were talking in the show with Ship about, what's the other guy's name? There's just another CIA operator who was always around, involved in Mockingbird. It was Ted Shackley. Like these guys were like moving bodies around,
Shackley's boys,
killing people. Yeah. So
yeah,
like these guys in the CIA, it's like something else. And I didn't ask Ship today, but I meant to. It's like there's two tiers at the CIA. There's the old bloodline kind of Eastern elites, and then the workers. And these are the old Eastern Brahmin elites that go all the way back to the Mayflower, Pilgrim Society, those type of things. So
absolutely,
they really don't. People who aren't aristocrats or like, part of the oligarchy, they don't understand how these people think. Like you're all peasants and you're not in our club.
Yes.
One of the interesting things, like they reveal themselves. Dulles was asked about Paperclip and Werner von Braun. Like, why did you bring Werner von Braun to the United States? He's like, he doesn't belong to my club. So like, that's just like a sensibility of his ideas. Like, I only hang out at my club with my friends. Everybody else's means nothing to me. It's like not outside of my bubble. So when you say these guys can't relate to you, they can't. Most of these guys never worked a day in their life. Like they never had like a real job, like a 9-to-5 job. They got paid career salaries and stuff like that. But
right.
I mean, it's just like George Bush. Like they had pictures of him. I mean, I'm old enough to remember this. He went into a like grocery store and he was totally confused as to how food got checked out through a scanner. He looked at it like he was like a bushman of the Kalahari
right.
who found a Coke bottle. Like he's like, what's this? How does this work? Like he had no idea. The same thing happened to Tucker Carlson, which is another Pilgrim Society just
right.
But he was in they reveal themselves inadvertently. He was in Russia and he had a grocery cart. He's like, look what you can do in Russia. You can get a quarter and stick it in, and then you can take it out. He had no idea that they have those in the States too. Right. He had never experienced that. So to him, this is like I'm showing you guys how interesting it is here.
Mm-hmm.
But that shows that these are blue bloods, super privileged.
Just exposing himself. Yeah.
So
No
doubt. People who say class is not important, I don't think are.
Life is what you make it. So what are you making? Healthier choices? New friends? New beginnings. Whatever you're making in life, make it matter together with LA Care Health Plan. Healthcare starts at $0.
Who does California Prop 33 hurt most? Vulnerable renters trying to find a home. Stanford and UC experts agree that 33 will make the housing crisis worse by reducing new affordable housing and paving the way for wealthy opponents to keep blocking new homes. 33 makes it harder for local teachers and firefighters to live in the communities where they work and would repeal current laws protecting low-income tenants from huge rent increases. The Mercury News warns 33 would only exacerbate the state's housing crisis, with no protections for vulnerable seniors or disabled veterans. The California Council for Affordable Housing, the California Housing Consortium, and the Housing Action Coalition all oppose 33. California needs to build more housing, not less. Vote no on Prop 33. It hurts. Ad paid for by No on 33, Californians for Responsible Housing, a bipartisan coalition of affordable housing advocates, taxpayers, veterans, and small businesses. Sponsored by the California Apartment Association. Ad committee's top funder, California Apartment Association.
I don't think it's everything, but there's a lot of class issues. 100%. And it's kind of like one of the fantasies about the United States, too, is like there's no classes here. I'm like, get out of town.
Mm-hmm. No, that's ridiculous.
It's totally ridiculous.
And I think like William Colby himself said that the Central Intelligence Agency owns everyone of any significance in the major media. And he served as director of Central Intelligence, right? And from 73 to 76 and under Nixon and Ford. And he came under the intense scrutiny during the public hearings as well. And so the Church Committee and the Pike Committee had formed by members of Congress in 75, I believe, and by 75. And so in order to hold those public hearings, investigating abuses by the CIA, and Colby inevitably served as the face at the time, and even was praised by members of the media to this day, claiming that he adopted a policy of openness and accountability. But I am very much under the impression that all he truly did was play the role he was always intended to fulfill, which was to provide cover for the agency while offering as little information as possible to the committees during the investigation. And
like a limited hangout.
Exactly.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
And Idaho Democratic Senator Frank Church at the time, he's asked about the evidence being exposed in regard to a CIA-sponsored propaganda operation during the course of the hearings. And the president of CBS News, Sig Mickelson, was also asked about his involvement with the CIA during his time while he was in charge at CBS. And he fully acknowledged that he had staff members at CBS that were 100% CIA directly affiliated working operatives. And it gets so much worse than that once you get into, for example, this document prepared by the Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities. They claim that essentially the origins of the public revelations that exposed this covert CIA propaganda operation this is when it was publicly on the record as Operation Mockingbird, was in the 73 Senate Watergate Committee investigation, which revealed that the executive branch had directed national intelligence agencies to carry out constitutionally questionable domestic security operations. And in 74, Seymour Hersh, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, he gets a front page news article published in the Times. And this claims that the CIA had been spying on anti-war activists for more than a decade. And he essentially exposes not only Mockingbird, but Operation Chaos, which was violating the agency's charter, which, essentially you aren't supposed to be in domestic operations of any kind. And of course, former CIA officials and lawmakers as well, including Senator Proxmire and Stuart Symington, they called for a congressional inquiry. And so then we have the committee deciding that most of its hearings would, of course, be held in a closed executive session, William, where most of this would never actually be exposed to the public. And if you remember, I listened to much of what I could. And basically you hear Colby, you hear him saying that, well, Senator, I would really prefer that this is something that we cover in executive session. And he would just consistently answer the questions that he was asked with exactly that response, meaning, no, I'm not going to answer that publicly in this moment. And no one would really hold his feet to the fire. It was kind of, at the very least, it's revealing enough, in my opinion. And so the committee decides that they're going to hold the vast majority in executive session. And so in order to protect intelligence sources and methods. And so there's a series of public hearings. And these public hearings, they really go on throughout September and October of 75 that educate the American public about the unlawful or improper conduct of the intelligence community, highlighting a few carefully selected cases of misconduct. And so this is when we kind of get our first peek and window into these domestic covert operations that were really being conducted by the CIA under this sort of like framework of combating communism. It seems to always be sort of the excuse for any kind of policy that tends to violate our inherent rights, or you know what I mean? It's kind
they've been using the communist Russia excuse forever.
Absolutely.
Since World War II.
Yeah. And I think that the scope of Mockingbird is just extraordinary. It's something that's in itself is almost incomprehensible, right? And so these hearings, they examine CIA biological agents program, a White House domestic surveillance program, IRS intelligence activities, FBI's program to disrupt the civil rights and anti-Vietnam War movements, which a lot of the guys within Nixon's administration were actually chosen because they had made their names off of really cracking down either publicly or, covertly on anti-war Vietnam War protest groups. And Operation Chaos, they flat out were creating student organizations. Not only were they funding, and it all came out that they were funding this, basically this student organization, this nationwide, it's called the NSA, the National Student Association. And the CIA directly was funding this association. And not only were they doing that, they were staffing they were staffing Berkeley, all these different universities with professors who were CIA agents. And Patty Hearst herself was caught up in the pipeline, sending students from Berkeley to the actual prison facility where, what's his name?
Cinque.
Cinque de Freeze or whatever.
Daniel DeFreeze, yeah.
Exactly. Where he was meeting with her privately for months leading up to her kidnapping.
Right. That was the whole thing that wasn't disclosed. She was supposedly a random victim to the public. This is 74. So this is all happening very close to Watergate's, 72? 71, 72.
Yeah, 72.
So and the Mockingbird is all over Watergate. But this is an incredible story of her. Like, her story is incredible. I've done 3 shows on the MK Ultra doctors who were around her. All these are all MK Ultra spook doctors.
Yes. It's amazing how much
Jolly West and Sachs and just Orne, they're all there. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But that whole story was also another Mockingbird story. It was fake. Right.
It's
so
amazing.
That's another touchstone of Mockingbird. She's an innocent little rich kid. She had heavy left wing sympathies. She might have had like rich person's guilt or something because her dad was so rich.
Yeah, it's very strange. All the different, she sounds like, when you hear her evolve into the revolutionary Tanya, just over the tapes themselves, it's so strange. It seems MK Ultra. It seems like, and what they said, they forced her into a closet and she lived in there in the dark for a while, just having to use the bathroom.
Sensory deprivation,
exactly.
Right? Training and abuse, repeated scripts
to read. Oh my gosh.
It's like somebody was guiding DeFreeze. DeFreeze wasn't the smart one, but the CIA agent was an African-American guy involved in Operation Phoenix. Holbrook or something.
Yeah,
there's a video of him.
Holbrook. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There's a video of him like sitting down with who's the guy who said being African American in America is being in a constant state of rage.
Yes.
Right? The author. Like, this is a full CIA professor with these literary heroes and with DeFreeze, and created the 5-headed snake out of pure nothingness. What was the group called? I forgot their name.
Symbionese Liberation Army. Yeah, the SLA.
Invented out of whole cloth, dude.
Invented out of whole cloth. And it was Colston Westbrook was that individual. Yeah. Yeah, and there's in 1976 the Ann Arbor Sun published an article and about who ran the SLA. And it blew me away when I read this article because basically the history of the SLA begins with a one-time CIA employee named Colston Westbrook that you just mentioned. And he's like a fast-talking 36-year-old specialist in Black English, and then was given a position as a professor at Cal Berkeley. And in early 1966, Westbrook was hired as a personal administrator by a civilian firm, Pacific Architects and Engineers Incorporated of Los Angeles, which was operating out of South Vietnam. And in the Washington intelligence, apparently, according to Washington intelligence sources, Pacific Architects was a subsidiary of the Pacific Corporation, which was a multinational consortium headquartered in Delaware and wholly owned by the Central Intelligence Agency. So, says SLA investigator Donald Freed.
Who does California Prop 33 hurt most? Vulnerable renters trying to find a home. Stanford and UC experts agree that 33 will make the housing crisis worse by reducing new affordable housing and paving the way for wealthy opponents to keep blocking new homes. 33 makes it harder for local teachers and firefighters to live in the communities where they work and would repeal current laws protecting low-income tenants from huge rent increases. The Mercury News warns 33 would only exacerbate the state's housing crisis, with no protections for vulnerable seniors or disabled veterans. The California Council for Affordable Housing, the California Housing Consortium, and the Housing Action Coalition all oppose 33. California needs to build more housing, not less. Vote no on Prop 33. It hurts. Ad paid for by No on 33, Californians for Responsible Housing, a bipartisan coalition of affordable housing advocates, taxpayers, veterans, and small businesses. Sponsored by the California Apartment Association. Ad committee's top funder, California Apartment Association. Experts agree Prop 33 will make the housing crisis worse, reducing new affordable housing and empowering wealthy opponents to block new homes. Plus, 33 repeals laws protecting low-income tenants from huge rent increases. California needs more housing, not less. No on Prop 33. Ad paid for by No on 33, Californians for Responsible Housing, a bipartisan coalition of affordable housing advocates, taxpayers, veterans, and small businesses. Sponsored by the California Apartment Association. Ad committee's top funder, California Apartment Association.
There is no such thing as not being a CIA employee if you work for Pacific Architects. So
Right.
Westbrook's
all huge CIA operation,
and his specialty was agent handling, training, and indoctrination.
Incredible,
isn't it?
With working, he was a professor who was also working at least at Atascadero, one of these state hospitals too.
Yep.
Like the whole thing is totally spooked up.
It's amazing,
totally amazing and crazy.
Yeah,
and the book that I did was Brad Schreiber's Revolution's End. People check it out.
Oh yeah,
and Schreiber flat out said like no African Americans would trust DeFries. They knew he was inauthentic. They knew that there was something plastic about the liberal. So that's Operation Chaos O'Neill. That's also like
everybody
make the left look terrible. Yeah.
Oh yeah, everybody knew in the prison, as far as I could tell. You had inmates who were going. They were trying to tell anybody who would listen, but journalists were getting barred from visiting the facility and talking to anyone. And then inmates were being punished by the guards themselves and the prison because allegedly the private prison and the California State Prison complex, they were entirely in on Operation Chaos with the CIA. And so they were allowing them to utilize these, these state facilities, state-run facilities.
Egress and weird, like secondary buildings that were there, like suddenly invented. Yeah. And Donald DeFries just walked out.
Yeah.
He literally walked out of jail. And it's weird stuff because it's weird kind of like Manson too, like weird things with the hospitals.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was the same facility that Manson was located in the early 50s. How crazy is that?
It's just totally crazy, but there's just crazy things happening in the state hospitals.
I know.
It's so bizarre. I mean, it's all CIA, not supposed to be operating domestically, never supposed to be, all this stuff. Total domestic opera. I mean, there's just like, where's the law for this? Well, there isn't one because we're
yeah, exactly.
Like it's crazy. Like that's still going on to 2024. This kind of crazy stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that really it's interesting because you have like I think that once we get into Woodward and Bernstein, because it's very interesting how the Washington Post aligns with Mockingbird and how much the Post was being flooded with Mockingbird agents at this time. And so but before Watergate even occurred, you had like in 1967, the Journal of American History, basically they reported that the New York Times had a front page headline. All right. And it reads, "A student group concedes it took funds from CIA." And this is when really it goes public that the CIA was funding these student organizations. And so it was one of the first times that anyone really got like I said, a window into domestic operations that were being held. And so it's kind of a strange story once you get into that, because clearly since the 1950s, the agency they had been financing independent private organizations and institutions that seemed to bear basically no relevance to the official tasks of the charter of the CIA, right? Which is supposed to be to collect information abroad that's relevant to America's national security. But, that is even a debate because in its infancy, it was created to basically just be a sort of intelligence gathering arm of the White House, of the executive branch. It's very strange how, these intelligence agencies really kind of evolved over time and really inevitably became really kind of the vehicle for what seems to be the deep state, right? This just these unelected bureaucrats right? In these closed private rooms, deciding our own fate for us, and we have no sort of accountability that we, that we can leverage against them, which is just a very unfortunate reality that we're facing in this moment. But what I should say though is that the underground magazine Ramparts on February 13th in 1967. They bought a full-page ad in the Times to publicize its March issue. And so the ad announces that Ramparts would reveal how the CIA had for many years sponsored the National Student Association, which was this umbrella organization for over 400 student clubs. And this was in exchange for services. And it has used students to spy. It has used students to pressure international student organizations into taking Cold War positions, and it has interfered in a most shocking manner in the international workings of the nation's largest and oldest student organization. That was the dramatic text taken out by this ad. But it was then later throughout this an investigation, confirmation was received of this story from the NSA chairman, Eugene Groves. And so it turns out that approximately $200,000 of annual subsidies had been given, right, and to the organization, and from a number of foundations, of course, that served as channels for CIA money. Which reminds me, it's kind of ridiculous when you realize how plausible deniability is achieved, right? It's like they're clearly like. One of my favorite examples is the penal colony, right? The essay that basically this Ivy League professor sent to William Holsinger, the aide of Congressman Leo Ryan, saying that MK Ultra had been driven underground for plausible deniability after the Church Committee hearings and it went public, and mainly in order to provide plausible deniability, they had driven it underground into various cult organizations, which he believed to be Jonestown and the People's Temple were one of those cult organizations. It was a very amazing thing, and I encourage everyone to go and find and read that document and listen to William Holsinger talk about it as well, because that man is one of my favorite sources. I don't really, some people, you can kind of... I try to not ever rely solely on sensing someone's, genuine authenticity based on like this sort of moral compass and framework that I'm working with. That because you can be, seduced and deceived. But I will say, William Holsinger provides all the receipts, and so in no way do I question his credibility. And yeah, so
but they had a spy on site at Jonestown in Guyana.
Oh yeah,
his name was Dwyer or Dyer or something.
Richard Dwyer.
And they said, "Get Dyer out of here!" Like,
yep.
And they had more drugs than like for the amount of people. They had drugs for like a hospital and all kinds of trank drugs and stuff that nobody who's doing standard first aid would have. So you got to extrapolate all the way back. And Jones was just gacked. Like that dude was on drugs, like heavy drugs. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So
and by the way, there's another insane note that I should mention, because that reminds me that just recently, on Tuesday, when Jose and I did this week's Already Dead, we just stumbled upon this crazy thread on Twitter, and I was fully aware of the West Point child development care center scandal that had occurred, but of course, it came up during the Presidio episode when I covered the witch hunt narrative, and I really kind of took the approach of really, I just believed that actual satanic ritual abuse was occurring at the McMartin preschool and at West Point and at the Presidio. I really do believe that, and I think there's plenty of evidence to point to that being the case. But the fact of the matter is that what prompted me to bring this up was basically that there's this absurd connection to this individual who is allegedly the perpetrator from the West Point pedophile scandal, which was this person named Mark Raymond. And when you go into who Mark Raymond is, well, it turns out that this is the the only individual who is so far basically been reported and actually named as the pedophile involved in the West Point ritual abuse scandal by name, right? And so, but it gets a little strange when you come to find out that, bizarrely, Mark Raymond was one of the first to give a glowing interview to none other than Jim Jones. While the People's Temple cult incubated in Ukiah, California, Mark Raymond, this alleged pedophile perpetrator from West Point, well, he just so happens to give a whitewashed pedophile, basically he gives this whitewashed, credible, angle on the People's Temple and Jim Jones, and then cozies up to Tim Stone, who inevitably becomes one of the reasons that Congressman Leo Ryan even goes down there because of a custody battle to try and get Tim Stone's son back from Jim Jones, who he had signed over to Jim Jones. As far as legitimately, so many of the people in the group of the People's Temple had signed over their own children to Jim. It was amazing. Not let alone all of their belongings. It was very insane.
Super dark. Was it the Lena Adjit, AJ?
Yeah, that's the person. Yeah,
and she's had a couple great threads recently.
She's great, man. I just now recently found her, but that's how
I reached out to her, because she was involved. She works for the lawyer involved in the Lisk case, Huerman, right?
Oh,
and then she told me about Huerman's uncle, who was I think he was a Lutheran minister or something in upstate New York, who got sued within the last 2 years in a civil suit.
Who does California Prop 33 hurt most? Vulnerable renters trying to find a home. Stanford and UC experts agree that 33 will make the housing crisis worse by reducing new affordable housing and paving the way for wealthy opponents to keep blocking new homes. 33 makes it harder for local teachers and firefighters to live in the communities where they work, and would repeal current laws protecting low-income tenants from huge rent increases. The Mercury News warns 33 would only exacerbate the state's housing crisis, with no protections for vulnerable seniors or disabled veterans. The California Council for Affordable Housing, the California Housing Consortium, and the Housing Action Coalition all oppose 33. California needs to build more housing, not less. Vote no on Prop 33. It hurts. Ad paid for by No on 33, Californians for Responsible Housing, a bipartisan coalition of affordable housing advocates, taxpayers, veterans, and small businesses. Sponsored by the California Apartment Association. Ad committee's top funder, California Apartment Association. Experts agree Prop 33 will make the housing crisis worse, reducing new affordable housing and empowering wealthy opponents to block new homes. Plus, 33 repeals laws protecting low-income tenants from huge rent increases. California needs more housing, not less. No on Prop 33. Ad paid for by No on 33, Californians for Responsible Housing, a bipartisan coalition of affordable housing advocates, taxpayers, veterans, and small businesses. Sponsored by the California Apartment Association. Ad committee's top funder, California Apartment Association.
For satanic ritual abuse at a church. Yeah, so this stuff is happening. And it's like in the deposition, the woman has the deposition saying this happened, and I think they settled. They settled the case, like it's gone. So I think the settlement took place. And there were seven. It wasn't a lone plaintiff. It was 7 different plaintiffs, which gives greater credibility.
Absolutely.
So anyway, so super dark stuff is out there.
Yes,
I mean, we're finding out all these networks, the Coral, Candyman network, and Gacy's clearly networked. It's just like crazy.
And that Mark Raymond, of course, is connected to all these orphanages in Mexico, and it's just, the where
finders. That's where the finders were supposedly going to Mexico. Like all this crazy stuff.
Isn't that insane?
You see this underground network that existed back then. And what was the Oak Island or whatever that happened in Michigan too? Yeah,
North Fox Island.
Yeah, North Fox.
That Island. Is like, I'm going to do an episode on that. I've just been putting it off because it's so dark. My gosh, man.
And it involved the elite. I mean, you have to remember, Detroit really was a shining beacon of the city back at the heyday of the, automotive industry. And so all these elites were involved in that. And Crowley actually had an OTO chapter right at the turn of the century for the board, elite people of Detroit. Probably gone defunct, and now it's just a bunch of, Phelamite rejects, but it was attractive to rich, bored people. Is like to do all that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think Frank Wisner is one of the key, like as far as just a key component, a key official within the context of Mockingbird itself, because he provides a decent, I would say, just some sort of credible thread that we can tug on, because basically Frank Wisner had been a member of the OSS, and since as early as 43, and by 47, he was recruited to join the State Department by the Secretary of State, who set the foreign policy for the Truman administration. And so after the National Security Act in 47 was officially approved and the Office of Special Projects was formally established and renamed to the Office of Policy Coordination, Wisner was chosen to lead the OPC as Assistant Director of Policy Coordination. So, according to its secret charter, the OPC's responsibilities include propaganda, economic warfare, preventative direct action, including sabotage, anti-sabotage, demolition and evacuation procedures, subversion against hostile states, including assistance to underground resistance groups, guerrillas and refugee liberation groups, and support of indigenous anti-communist elements in threatened countries of the free world. So what could go wrong, right? It's just
crazy.
And then you have Deborah Davis. She's this author that she explains in her 1979 biography of Katharine Graham, who's the owner of the Washington Post, right? That the CIA ran an Operation Mockingbird during this time. So she's one of the first people to put the name Mockingbird into circulation effectively. And so during this time, she writes that the Prague-based International Organization of Journalists, IOJ, received money from Moscow and controlled reporters on every major newspaper in Europe, disseminating stories that promoted the communist cause. And so this is allegedly what Frank Wisner, director of the OPC, had. This is allegedly the reason that he created Operation Mockingbird with Dulles in response to the IOJ. And so he then recruited Phil Graham, who served as publisher and later co-owner of the Washington Post and its parent company, to run this project within the industry. And according to Davis, by the early 1950s, Wisner owned respected members of the New York Times, Newsweek, CBS, and other communications vehicles. So by 1951, Wisner would succeed Alan Dulles, becoming the second deputy director of plans with Richard Helms as his chief of operations, who was very much played a key pivotal role in really the undermining and what I would call the silent coup, right? Who's the author of that book? That was such a great book. Lynn Kolodny, I think is his name.
Kolodny,
yeah. And then Secret Agenda by Hogan. I mean, my gosh, like if you want to read Watergate books that kind of provide a real credible alternative theories, look into those books because they're phenomenal, and I really do believe they have a much more credible version of events.
It's mega cloak and dagger stuff,
Absolutely.
Heavy duty. E. Howard Hunt was like director of operations in the United States for the CIA.
Oh yeah,
like what the heck is this guy doing? Bungling a dumb burglary, trying to get like naughty black books or something. Like the whole thing doesn't wash. It doesn't.
Him and McCord were both members of the highly secretive Office of Security within the CIA itself, which only directly reported to Richard Helms, the director of the CIA. Wow. Yes, and so they were members of that group before they both allegedly met for the first time when Hunt got his position by Colson in the White House, and Colson was just one of his, an individual he went to school with and was in a fraternity with. He was like
Colson was friends with Wisner?
No, Colson was friends with Hunt. But yeah, Colson and Hunt were
right. So they're like buddies too. Yeah.
Yeah, they like co-chaired a fraternity together in Brown.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's Colson amazing, had a real come to Jesus moment. Like he went from being a hardball player to a Reformed Christian, but before he kind of converted, his most famous kind of quote was, "Grab them by the balls and their hearts and minds will follow."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think he actually had that on like a statement over his desk.
That is amazing.
So yeah, he was a real piece of work. I mean, they all were. Wisner was too. Wisner was part of like they talk about Yale's secret societies. Their secret societies of the University of Virginia. Oh, yeah. Wisner was part of like the darkest, most secretive skull and bones of University of Virginia.
Course.
Called Seven. It's called Seven.
It's called Seven?
And they don't even acknowledge that they're even in it. And then when you die, you get like a wreath of black magnolias, and that's your insignia that you were part of the secret society.
What's the where'd you say this was?
University of Virginia. Yeah, that's a whole nother show. It's just the University of Virginia secret societies, because people know like the Yale ones, but
man, that goes back to the Opium Wars, and it's just crazy how
slavery. Virginia really is the founding state, like in so many ways of the country. So like those old Virginia families are very different. Like
it's amazing.
I mean, that's where it happened. I mean, it just turned out to be a slave state, but
exactly.
Virginia's kind of Richmond was kind of the jewel in the South in a lot of ways, I think.
I agree. But I mean, after leaving the Post, you remember we talked about Bernstein and Woodward, and what I think is so interesting about this is that once Carl Bernstein leaves the Washington Post in 1977, he's primarily, of course, known for his work with Bob Woodward, exposing much of the original news reporting on the Watergate scandal. Spent 6 months investigating the relationship of the CIA once he leaves the Post in 77. And allegedly, he starts to investigate this relationship between the CIA and the press during the Cold War years. Very interesting reaction for Carl Bernstein, because once you start to consider the fact that, first of all, he had this interesting article that is titled "The CIA and the Media, How Americans' Most Powerful News Media Worked Hand in Glove with the Central Intelligence Agency and Why the Church Committee Covered It Up." That's the title. But this is very interesting because basically I had just stated that Donald Graham was very much a part of Mockingbird with Wisner, and allegedly they were like extremely close friends, and Wisner considered Graham to be his best friend, closest friend. Yes.
They both went crazy and committed suicide.
Very interesting.
That's what they said. I mean, that's what the cover said. You have to doubt everything now. Like
we
were talking the pre-show about Grace Kelly and her death. Like I haven't even looked into it. Hyper suspicious. Just like you said, like her car ends up on a freaking member of
the yard
of somebody
in
who's
the
a
yard
member
of an OTS member.
The Solar Temple member. Give me a break. That's so suspicious. After giving him $10 million. So like that's how you cover it up. Like after the grift happens, like it's like, well, we got to get rid of him because we keep.
And they were knowingly having a dispute. She was calling out DeMambro for extorting her. That's what she was doing, and so there's no real doubt. It's not been covered publicly. It's really just not in the public consciousness to any extent. But what I think is very interesting, is that you have
I talked to Dave Wood. Oh, one of the interesting things before I forget is that the guy Kevin Shipp, who I worked with today, he was literally like the body security for William Casey. And you have on your stuck on your top of your Twitter page is the famous Casey quote. We'll know we have full success when everything the public believes is lies.
Right. Like, we will know our disinformation campaign is complete when everything the American public believes is false.
It's an incredible statement because it just shows how they want total control.
You got 5 on it? With the $5 meal deal at McDonald's, you about to eat. Your choice of a tender, juicy McChicken or a hot, cheesy McDouble sandwich and a crispy 4-piece McNuggets and a small fries and a small drink for just $5.
Money.
Woo. 5 gets you more at McDonald's. Prices and participation may vary for limited time only. Decisions.
Wait a minute. Are you still looking for cars on Carvana?
Yeah, decisions.
When I used Carvana, I found the exact car I was looking for in minutes. Bought it on the spot.
Electric or full diesel? Decisions.
Come on, you've been at it for weeks. Just buy it already.
You're right. Crossover it is. Decisions decided.
Whether you know exactly what you want or like to take your time, buy your car the convenient way with Carvana.
And that's a theme within the occult too, is like they're such control freaks. Like you can talk about control freaks. Their dictums is everything is under control. I have total control. They want
full
total
spectrum
control
dominance,
of your mind. Yeah, full spectrum in the brain
That's
too.
really what it is.
It's that profound, really.
It's incredible, man. Yeah. And so yes, this basically you have Woodward and Bernstein connections to intelligence and Alexander Haig. And that's really what kind of spurred the downfall, which shifted the scope and the angle that the public viewed Watergate in as being an obstruction case involving, Nixon trying to get dirt on his political rivals. Right. It's just a complete ridiculous narrative, but it all is revealed by Woodward himself, who keeps going to the Watergate Committee and saying to them at least twice, not only one time, hey, you need to actually interview the individual, the only individual who can actually reveal the existence of the White House taping systems, right? And so it's like so very clear and obvious that the reason he keeps going to the Watergate Committee is he's trying to basically he's being used as Alexander Haig's what Kolodny called Woodward was he called Woodward Alexander Haig's cat's paw. That basically Woodward was being used by Alexander Haig, member of the Knights of Malta and Le Cercle with Kissinger, by the way. Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, oh yeah, I can see. I think Haig is a Pilgrim Society.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's all there, dude. It's all there,
man. And so basically, yeah, he exposes he tells the committee more than one time about the individual who can reveal the taping system, which is Alexander Butterfield, and it's the only individual who they could leverage to reveal the existence of the White House taping system, which would inevitably lead to the downfall of Nixon, proving the obstruction, right, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And in reality, John Dean was the architect of the cover-up, the White House counsel, the White House aide, but that's a whole nother story. But so Donald Graham, he's running the Washington Post throughout the 50s and directly assisted the CIA, of course, during Mockingbird with Wisner. And he does this by flooding the staff of the Post with intelligence agents, which happened to include Ben Bradlee. All right. And Ben Bradlee, he just so happens to be the individual who's allegedly responsible for urging Woodward and Bernstein on in their effort to help bring down the Nixon administration. And so Bradlee, of course, he would later be largely responsible for aiding in the media cover-up by countering the disclosures of Henry Vincent's gay escort service. Yeah. Wow. So uncovered by the journalists at the Washington Times. And so he's running counterpiece articles at the Post, trying to discredit the Washington Times reporting on the Henry Vincent network. That it's so crazy. And
so crazy. Wow.
So you have like presidential spokesman Ron Ziegler would attempt to label the break-in, of course, the third-rate burglary, but he had significant help with Bob Woodward and at the Post advancing that theory with no coverage of the burglary itself, basically at the time, which is absurd. But so that wasn't even considered to be, of any concern within the context of the investigation. As far as the public was concerned, they were basically being led by the nose from the reporting at the Washington Post. And so Len Kolodny in The Silent Coup, he explains how Bob Woodward lied to conceal his early ties to General Alexander Haig, who became President Nixon's White House chief of staff following the 1973 resignation of H.R. Haldeman in the wake of the scandal. And he is the one who allegedly plays this key role in persuading Nixon to resign in 74.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah. Isn't
so
it?
They get the guy replaced. Woodward supposedly has no connection to Haig. Haig slides into the chief of staff and convinces Nixon to go. Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
None of that stuff was ever discussed. Like, it's a masterful spied cloak and dagger manipulation. It's off the charts.
It really is. It's an operation within an operation, right? It's like an inception. It's ridiculous, because like Chladni says, or no, it was Jim Hogan in Secret Agenda, right? It's just like not everyone is read in on the secret agenda that's covertly playing out, right? Like the Cubans had no idea. They're like, why is this so sloppy? They had no idea why the second break-in was even happening. They all thought the first break-in in May went great. And so they didn't understand why the secondary break-in was even ordered in the first place. But it turns out it was because John Dean was very worried because an individual who was connected to this hooker referral pipeline and all of this prostitution network scandal that he was directly involved with and lived with his wife for a time, Heidi Reichen, who was the madam of that whole operation at the Watergate. He basically just wanted to see what dirt they had on the client list of the prostitution client list. And this was at Ida Maxey Wells' desk. We know this now. Eugenio Martinez himself, who was one of the Cuban burglars, he had a key that Carl Schaffler, the arresting officer, he tackles him to the ground. They have a scuffle. And in the middle of it, Eugenio Martinez is trying to swallow the key because it's a key piece of evidence to prove why they were there. And that key just so happened to only fit to Ida Maxey Wells' desk, which was the only desk that wasn't on the telephone system. It had its own isolated, it wasn't on the switchboard in the DNC. So they could basically have like these, they could procure the prostitutes for the Johns using this taping system at Spencer Oliver Jr.'s desk, which was Ida Maxey Wells was his secretary. So sorry to go off on that tangent, but it's
really something else. I interviewed, just for people, FYI, I'll repost this, but his name was Joff Shepard. He was there. I think he was working as an attorney for somebody, but he wrote The Nixon Conspiracy, Watergate, and the Plot to Remove the President, where he argues Nixon should never have resigned. Like, he should have just taken it to the impeachment because he wasn't implicated. It was the real thing he wasn't involved in what was going on. He was detached from it. It was the cover-up that happened after the Watergate event that implicated him.
Right.
It's my understanding, right? So
exactly.
He just got played. He got played like God. They never should have even got him involved. They should have just said, you guys deal with it. You blew it. Go to court or figure it out. But
exactly.
They just shouldn't even have been discussing that stuff. So anyway, he was, I think that history will show he got outmaneuvered by this kind of real heavy stuff happens in Washington, real crazy.
Yeah. And by the way,
connections and things, and these hidden connections are really important because people do keep them hidden. Like, you don't like this. It's the benefit of being in a secret society. Have you ever heard of the game called Werewolf? No. It was invented. It's kind of like an interesting social study. And I saw a clip on this, but it was invented by a guy in Russia. And what you do is you could put people in a circle like 10, and 2 people are the werewolves. And so everybody closes their eyes, and the werewolves decide who to go, who's going to die, like figuratively die. So they kind of communicate. They pick somebody. Everybody opens their eyes. And then the people have to figure out who the 2 werewolves are. And it's kind of like that game. And it shows that if you have inside information, the informational monopolies are incredibly powerful. And that's what secret societies really are in a lot of ways, are these informational monopolies and informational relationships that are unknown to the public. Exactly. But that's why there's so many of these people in secret societies who are powerful. He just dropped off there. So there is a correlation between these secret societies, secret information, and the centralized intelligence is, in a way, a secret. It's a bunch of werewolves picking off whoever's left and just denying that they're involved. So, sorry, man. Yeah, I'll send you this werewolf thing. It's pretty interesting. Let me see if
that is absurd to me, but I just it's not at all surprising, the cultural aspect of that. It makes all the sense in the world. But the secret societies themselves, it's just so very clear and obvious to me that, it's something that is always a covert hidden thread that crops up within every single one of these various stories that we tend to, focus on, including this very story, Mockingbird, which, not only we just...
Have you ever heard of a game called...
Okay, you ready? I'm going to play
Yeah,
this.
I'm ready. Let's hear it.
Have you ever heard of a game called Werewolf?
No.
Everyone gets a piece of paper. It's either got villager written on it, but 2 have the word werewolf. Someone runs the game to make sure no one's cheating, and they go, okay, it's nighttime, everyone close your eyes. Werewolves choose someone to kill, and the werewolves go... They say, okay, everyone close your eyes, it's morning time, open them again. During the night, Francis was killed. There's then a conversation, and this is where it gets interesting, between all the villagers and the 2 werewolves over who the werewolves are. Then at the end of the day, the villagers have to decide who they're going to kill, and they say, well, we're going to kill Constantine. It's revealed by the person running the game, I'm afraid Constantine was a villager. And the game continues. The villagers win the game if they kill both werewolves. The werewolves win the game if they kill all but 2 villagers. And the werewolves usually win. The game was invented by a student of sociology in Russia who wanted to prove his thesis that an uninformed majority will always lose a battle of information against an informed minority. So that just shows when you have hidden information, you can completely manipulate a large group of people.
Nah, not quite.
What's up?
Sell my car on Carvana. It's just not quite the right time.
Crazy coincidence. I just sold my car to Carvana.
What? I told you about it 2 days ago.
When you know, you know. You know? I'm even dropping it off at one of those sweet car vending machines and getting paid today.
That's a good deal.
Oh, great deal. Come on. What's your heart saying?
You're right. When you know...
You know.
Sold.
Whether you're looking to sell your car right now or just whenever feels right, go to Carvana.com and sell your car the convenient way. Terms and conditions apply.
Decisions.
Wait a minute. Are you still looking for cars on Carvana?
Yeah, decisions.
When I used Carvana, I found the exact car I was looking for in minutes. Bought it on the spot.
Electric or full diesel? Decisions.
Come on, you've been at it for weeks. Just buy it already.
You're right. Crossover it is. Decisions decided.
Whether you know exactly what you want or like to take your time, buy your car the convenient way with Carvana.
Absolutely, man. That, you know what, that it just instantly, I think of this kind of like this, basically this sort of just, I would say, mental perspective that has kind of been resonating within me for the past like 2 weeks. Really, it was probably your fault for the Pilgrim Society. It
was an eye opener for me too, man.
It's amazing.
I did that originally for Charlie Robinson's macroaggressions, but I didn't understand how deep it went.
Exactly.
And then I didn't know at the time. It shows how like it's compartmentalized information, because I kept looking for the membership list, Google, like a knucklehead, Googling and looking around. And then I found somebody online who had it, and it was through, I can't remember, the Center for Foreign Politics. Chusudovsky's out of Canada site. Mm-hmm. So I immediately went there, started looking through feverishly, and then downloaded everything and kept a copy of myself. So I got a copy as well. I think, and then they're not complete. So I think you have to either go to England or London and find like the library where they're at and see who's on there today. But
oh yeah,
the fact that it's not disclosed and the ties to King Charles III is very suspect.
Oh, very much so. But I also
talk about class, dude. Like we talk about class. Wow,
I just think it's such a perfect representation of this resonating perspective that I'm feeling within my core, which is basically who we have to discern for ourselves between the true power brokers and their willing puppets, right? Like it just, I feel like that is such an important just facet of engaging with reality itself in this moment. And for us to speak in any certain terms, right? When it comes to just philosophy and outlook, and as far as politically, if you want to have an opinion on basically the political climate in this very day and age, you have to contend with that notion, right? Can you answer that accurately and effectively? And none of us can truly. I mean, some of us, I would say to a deeper extent, we could potentially try and attempt to answer that question. But yeah, I just think that it's time we discern and distinguish for ourselves, right?
How many Pied Pipers are out there? Exactly. How many of these werewolves are out there? That's the whole thing. Is like this Eric Weinstein revelation by Johnny Vedmore, where he was writing stuff for the UN. They never disclosed, which is this economic migration, which is going to screw everybody in the world. Literally, Ireland is being like the great replacement. You don't even have to call it that. You're getting shafted out of like the heritage of your family and ancestry for centuries by articles written by Eric Weinstein, which you can deduce what other articles are out there. These very intellectual academic articles for making changes that aren't this is the werewolf premise, right? That aren't disclosed to the public, so you don't have that information. How to get transgender into schools, how to get people to have these operations. I bet there's articles for all this stuff. How to make people demoralized, how to make them think they're racist, how to have this internal dialogue with themselves where they don't ever take any action, turning them into passive, weak, spineless twits. Exactly. I bet there's articles for all that stuff written by scum like Eric Weinstein, and he is a scumbag for not disclosing that, and he has like 1 million followers.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I mean, these guys, that's why it's all controlled. Like, I think these guys are all promoted through much more powerful. Powerful
you know what that reminds me of is Edward Bernays and kind of this really a direct connection through Mark Bernays Randolph, right? And basically the owner and first CEO of Netflix.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
We're still around. Listen to this. This is God's side. He's been on Joe Rogan's all the time. Mm-hmm. Tons of followers. Watch the host's face when he asked him if he's part of the Mossad.
The cat out of the bag. You're actually a Mossad agent.
Oh, you are the first person on my media tour to actually either have read that far into the book or to mention it. I thought it would be the top.
Like if you watch the whole thing, the host is Jan Jekyll, so like his eyes are like all whacked out. Like he is totally bugged out.
That's a proper reaction.
Like you literally have a freaking intel agent, like a literal admitted intel agent.
That is absolutely ridiculous, man. What I thought was such a good example of kind of how they operated in the early days of Mockingbird, at least according to Bernstein, because keep in mind, he's working hand in hand with Woodward throughout the disclosure of Watergate, and then he inevitably leaves the post within 3 years, and he reveals this huge CIA connection to the media. And so I just don't see that as a coincidence. I feel as if maybe he felt like he had been played, right? Yes, and he was sort of kind of firing shots at the intelligence community in some sort of way. But
I think you're right. I think that makes perfect sense. Like he was in the mix of this huge intel operation with Haig and all these other players and all their secret society connections, operating behind the scenes, playing werewolf, so to speak.
Exactly.
And getting rid of like the guys who didn't know that they were being manipulated against. Right. Gosh. So like they think they're just like doing some kind of break-in stuff. And somebody's, we got to get rid of Nixon. We're going to destabilize him. And that's our real goal, is to show that we have more power too. We're going to take power away from the presidency, because then keep it with ourselves. Insane. It's so dark. And but it's like that. And it's the same thing. Like they mentioned in the book today, all the stuff that happened with Trump. How much different is that than what happened with Nixon and this Nixon Watergate effect? Or
Russiagate. I remember during Russiagate, it was so difficult because, I try and just objectively, grapple with most of these scandals, and I don't really have a dog in the fight, right, politically speaking, and so I just kind of want to be objectively as close to the truth as I can possibly be, if I'm capable of that. But it was just so clear and obvious that they were leveraging the CIA. I mean, how many times can you witness John Brennan of all people, right? I mean, my gosh, right? Like he's during his time in the Obama administration, he's over here overthrowing Libya and, bringing slavery back to Africa. and people tend to have no recollection of that to even taking
shame.
place.
He has no shame about it. They have no shame.
Now he's being utilized as, one of many different talking heads out there, giving credibility to the intelligence community in these various CIA talking points. And so once again, during Russiagate, who did you have? He was the one going on MSNBC telling Rachel Maddow how there's 50 other anonymous intelligence officials who, if you only knew, if you only saw what I saw.
Right. It was all fake. They went to the IG, the investigator general, and said it's all baloney. I mean, isn't that treason? Can't she be arrested for treason? Like, I mean, I'm honestly, like, it seems like that's treason to me. Like, you're betraying. Like, you think, and it's it's like these agencies and the CIA. That's why it's so important to like look into this stuff, because they're above the law. Like Dulles, thought he was a technocrat, and he thought that he should be the one making the decisions over everybody else. And what's really scary is they stay in power longer and are in the places of power longer than the presidents. So the presidents come and go, and they're just there. Dulles is there for decades. And, same thing with this guy, Shackley. Like, he was the book reveals, Ship reveals, like, Shackley was supposedly fired in 1979 by Stansfield Turner, an admiral. But he's still hanging out at the CIA back into the late 90s. He died in 2002. But he's walking by Ship in the late 90s. Like, what's he doing there? I thought he got fired. So it's like a fake firing. And the same thing with Dulles. Yeah. Like, if you read the Talbot book on November 22nd, November 22nd, 1963, where is Dulles? He's at the farm on an adjacent property outside the CIA, doing God knows what, supposedly fired, but they just don't even listen. They're so powerful, they don't even care. Gosh. Yeah, they don't even listen. Him and
Alan Dulles and Richard Bissell both played Kennedy and forced his position. In basically, they thought by forcing the Bay of Pigs operation that they could force Kennedy's hand, that he would have no other choice than to provide the air support if they just ran through with the operation and put him in a corner. And Kennedy said, "Fuck you." Like, that's basically what happened, right? That was his reaction to it. He said, "I am not going to fall for this. I would rather be the one left holding the bag," which was the alternative, which was, okay, at the very least, if he does refuse, right, we'll leave him holding the bag, which is exactly what they really did do. And, in essence, when it came to the Bay of Pigs. And so when you realize that, and then also,
nah, not quite.
What's up?
Sell my car on Carvana. It's just not quite the right time.
Crazy coincidence. I just sold my car to Carvana.
What? I told you about it 2 days ago.
When you know, you know. I'm even dropping it off at one of those sweet car vending machines and getting paid today.
That's a good deal.
Oh, great deal. Come on. What's your heart saying?
You're right. When you know.
You know.
Sold.
Whether you're looking to sell your car right now or just whenever feels right, go to Carvana.com and sell your car the convenient way. Terms and conditions apply.
Bada boom. Sold.
Huh?
Just sold my car on Carvana. Dropping it off and getting paid today.
Already?
What, you still haven't sold yours? You told me about it months ago.
Is
the offer good?
Oh, the offer's great.
Don't have another car yet?
I could trade it in for this car I love.
Come on, what are we waiting for?
You're right.
Let's go.
Whether you're looking to sell your car right now or just whenever feels right, go to Carvana.com and sell your car the convenient way. Terms and conditions apply.
Douglas Caddy, the original attorney for the first Watergate 5, and then, of course, the Watergate 7, they became once G. Gordon Liddy and Howard Hunt were also named. But it was basically Douglas Caddy was the first original attorney for them. And he had gotten a call at 2 a.m. by Howard Hunt because he was already his private attorney and friend. And it turns out Douglas Caddy, he also worked for Mullen and Company, right? The company that was owned by Robert Mullen, that basically it was holding this very, what they call a CIA cover contract, right? And it's apparently it was very lucrative. And it was called the Mullen and Company. And Howard Hunt, when he had one of 3 fake retirements from the CIA, he went to work for the CIA front company, Mullen and Company. And that's who he was working for right just before he was employed at the White House.
So they're all fake retiring. It's got to be an inside joke among these guys. It's the werewolf process, a werewolf game again. Where they have the info. They all know they're still working for the agency. They know who's working for the agency.
Exactly.
Like incredible stuff has happened in this country by agents. David Ferry, like the book that was burying the boys, like the Hopsickers, like he's not a contract agent. Right. He's an agent.
Exactly.
He's an agent. These are agents.
You know, a great example of that is what Douglas Caddy claims was kind of Nixon's role in JFK's assassination. He says he wasn't directly responsible, but he sort of kind of, set this unforeseen chain of events, to occur in a way when he was Eisenhower's VP. It's very strange because essentially John Foster Dulles was Eisenhower's Secretary of State. Nixon was Eisenhower's vice president. And according to Doug Caddy, it was during this time that Nixon would set up this chain of events that ultimately led to the assassination of not only JFK, but RFK and MLK, right? I mean, that all happened in 68 and 63 was JFK. So it within 5 years, the assassination, everybody's kind of like anyone who is really standing in the way of the complete takeover of the deep state. In many ways, it really seems that way. Not that they weren't already deeply embedded in DC. It was just that I feel like there are factions consistently sort of warring with each other. Yeah. It's not as plain and simple as black and white, right? It never is. And so it does seem like they're always trying to position themselves, in certain terms. And then of course, if it comes down to it, they have no qualms about taking you out, whether it's a soft coup.
At that time in the 60s, these were all Cold Warriors and guys it's interesting because Shipp points this out. I just read The Twilight of the Shadow Government, so it's in my mind. Right. But they were all forged in World War II. So they were kind of all forged in a war that wasn't as bad, it didn't touch the U.S. continent, but they all had that kind of warrior mentality.
Yes.
And came from where we're around Eisenhower. So they're confronted with a lot of social change, some of which was manufactured by them, or possibly, but like the civil rights movement. So a lot of these people, the sympathy, it's like, no, we're not giving up power. We're not giving power. We're going to kill you. And so I think that they really went on a killing rampage.
Yeah. And really, according to this whole alternative version, or at least an alternative theory of what could have been another motivating factor in the JFK assassination, is the fact that in early 1960, Nixon apparently calls up his buddy Howard Hughes, who gave a very lucrative donation to Nixon's brother when he became president. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah, very, very interesting. But
and Nixon was a little bit more close to some of these stuff. He apparently would go to like places where Hoover was on vacation that were mob connections.
Oh, yeah. So. They said he was mobbed up before he even ran for the Senate.
Wow.
Or Congress.
See, I'm not surprised.
Yeah,
he coveted. He was really kind of a talent story, not a very charismatic guy, but smart. Right. And from like his parents, his dad was like an orange grove,
right.
He was an agriculturalist, so he was really a remarkable story. It's too bad he was this he took a beating from so many different angles all the time. Poor guy. But
I know that Trafficante and Meyer Lansky were both affiliated with Nixon. And that was all like connections between him and his brother. And it was all like before he even ran for Congress, which is just amazing to me.
Yeah. See, so he coveted things. There's a picture. Have you ever seen that picture of Nixon with Prescott Bush?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's like Nixon is clearly his spaniel. It's like little spaniel fawning dog. He doesn't even try to reject it. And Prescott just knows he's the boss. He's got his hand on his hat. Right. Like amongst men, ridiculous. Like that's just not cool. But for Nixon, it was A-okay. Like it was a sign of authority, like he was the boss. But
exactly. Yeah.
But Johnson too was mobbed up. He was very much there were meetings like people would go to mob meetings and there Johnson would be there with these mobsters. Like, what the hell is Johnson doing here? He's the president. Like they just didn't even know. Like, so it's a lot. It's a lot of strange events, but like
it's amazing.
It's the 70s and the 60s, or the real history, not the Mockingbird Grand Wurlitzer version. The real history is incredible, and I think that goes by down to this theme of Mockingbird and the Wurlitzer. It's about this fake reality, the creation of a fake reality, a Wizard of Oz curtain for the public, where they don't know the machinery is moving. And it's incredible. So all of the history that I study, like I'm a history major, like I have to go back and reread the history because it's all expurgated. A lot of the important stuff is out. Like I just turned 56. I grew up with a time like it was just a known fact in my family that both Kennedy brothers were shot by crazy lunatics.
Right.
And it's just complete bullshit. It's total nonsense. It's no way. It was they were all ran, and I mean, they're both 20. You know, Sirhan and Oswald were both 24. It's interesting, same age. So it's like almost they were handled from teens or something up until the moment of it. And
yes, I know that Sirhan was in a mind-controlled trance, seeing targets in his eyes and frantically pulling the trigger. And even after he was tackled to the ground, they had to pry the weapon out of. It's kind of amazing. Like and then they put him in a trance during the trial because both the prosecution and the defense both had hypnotists in the trial. Put Sirhan under a trance and walk him through basically this. Like it's leading the witness is exactly what they were doing, but it's basically what they were doing to him. The prosecution, for certain, that's what they were doing, because they're essentially giving him the motivation, saying, "You want to kill RFK, right? You want to kill RFK," and he's like, "You remember Sirhan, right? You have the gun in your hand." He's like telling him what he was doing. It was very strange, but then you hear Sirhan just viscerally react. And he just stops like making any sort of verbal. He just starts kind of like having this hysterical fit, and he just keeps pulling the trigger frantically when they're walking him through the trance. It's insane. And at one point, he even does this whole monkey routine and performs this routine by jumping up on the prison bars. And then after they pull him out of the trance, they ask him if he can recall any sort of thing whatsoever, and he couldn't recall one thing. So they said that it proved to them, specifically the psychiatrists who went through that monkey routine with him, that he was very much overly suggestive to being hypnotized, which meant to him that he had been hypnotized many, many times in the past. And so that whole scenario, the details are very extraordinary, but
they're unbelievable. But most of the authors who've written about it all accept the kind of mind control thing, whether it's Peace, Tim Tate, another guy who's, I can't remember his last name. I have the book somewhere around here. But like they all kind of, it's a known fact that he was missing for 6 weeks. Like he was in somewhere. Like they can't account for where he is. Like
that's
where
amazing.
Yeah. So, but yeah, they said like there is a just for people, you can go up. It's called the Stanford Hypnotism Scale, and they actually find subjects on a scale. And some people can just play around with them, and some people cannot be hypnotized.
That makes sense.
If you ever watch a hypnotism show, they'll use like they don't do them anymore because people sued or something, but they will ask a pool to come forward, and they'll have a list of people, and then they'll ask people to go back and sit down. It's because it's a random pool, and not everybody can be hypnotized. So the people who they're not responding to his hypnotic suggestions, they just say to go back to the audience because the other ones are hypnotized, right?
Wow.
And so it's like a seeding process. And Esther Brooks, I mean, those I got to tell you, I go back to this all the time. The Esther Brooks conversations with J. Edgar Hoover are a remarkable piece of American history taking place in 1935, where he's explaining the whole thing, understanding compartmentalizing brains. He talked about stables of hypnotizable subjects.
Oh my God.
And that hypnotism will be the most important weapon that will define civilizations in history. And it's like all these guys are hypnotized. They're all hypnotized. Do you know that Mike Tyson was powerized? That Gus Customato took him to a hypnotist 3 times a week and turned him into the most vicious fighter ever.
Nah, not quite.
What's up?
Sell my car on Carvana. It's just not quite the right time.
Crazy coincidence. I just sold my car to Carvana.
What? I told you about it 2 days ago.
When you know, you know. You know? I'm even dropping it off at one of those sweet car vending machines and getting paid today.
That's a good deal.
Oh, great deal. Come on. What's your heart saying?
You're right. When you know.
You know.
Sold.
Whether you're looking to sell your car right now or just whenever feels right, go to Carvana.com and sell your car the convenient way. Terms and conditions apply.
Bada boom. Sold.
Huh?
Just sold my car on Carvana. Dropping it off and getting paid today.
Already?
What, you still haven't sold yours? You told me about it months ago.
Is
the offer good?
Oh, the offer's great.
Don't have another car yet?
I could trade it in for this car I love.
Come on, what are we waiting for?
You're right.
Let's go.
Whether you're looking to sell your car right now or just whenever feels right, go to Carvana.com and sell your car the convenient way. Terms and conditions apply.
It's called Powerized. So they put him into a deep trance. This guy's walking around. This is one of the greatest boxers of all times. Hypnotism subject. Go back and look. Yeah, go back.
That is amazing, man.
No, it gets worse. The Rasputin knew how to hypnotize people.
Oh my God,
that's what he's doing.
That makes
so
all
like
the
the crux of the end of an entire civilization is this kind of weird wandering monk who's into sex magic.
My God.
And knows how to hypnotize. Like, it's unbelievable. And they miss, like, as usual, the kind of like sterilize. It's probably Mockingbird history if something like that exists. But they take out all the references to all this stuff.
Of course. You know, I heard a doctor named Robert Duncan, who was like a Harvard graduate and an investigator who wrote a book called Project Soul Catcher: Secrets of Cyber and Cybernetics Revealed. And he explains, I listened to him in an interview in as recent as like 2012. And he was explaining that over the past 10 years, he had personally interviewed more than 650 people who claimed to have been under government mind control. He said many of them said they were in the Manchurian Candidate program, ID program free. And he went to the Senate Intelligence Committee and met with 26 senators as well as the head of the LA FBI after working with this consortium of scientists on a research project for over 8 years. This Dr. Robert Duncan says that he provided the closest estimate he could reach, that there are about 10,000 Manchurian candidates in the works being programmed by the CIA right now that can be used at any time around the world. However, he concluded by explaining that only a small percentage actually become successful Manchurians. He says...
Right. So that's the Estabrook stable concept, right?
Exactly.
Like a stable of horses.
That
guy, who was the second shooter for Trump? What was that guy's name?
Was Ryan Routh, right? Wasn't that the second one?
He was on, he was on Oahu on the Eastern Shore, literally like 5 miles away from where Chapman worked and lived.
Mark David Chapman.
You can't even believe you can't. And the same weird stuff. How does this guy Chapman like flew around the world? He's in Asia with no money. Right. And this guy, Ruff, is like building like huts for poor people or something. And on the same path, he's in Ukraine all of a sudden, pro-Ukraine. He's then somewhere else. He's flying all over the place. Where's the guy getting the money?
It's so ridiculous.
They're all being puppeteered, man. It's great. It's unbelievable.
It truly
is unbelievable.
It's amazing to me. But there's one thing that Bernstein, he had outlined, like kind of the process of recruitment for the journalists as intelligence assets. And I thought this was amazing because he writes that often the CIA's relationship with a journalist might begin informally with a lunch, a drink, a casual exchange of information. An agency official might then offer a favor, for example, a trip to a country difficult to reach. In return, he would seek nothing more than the opportunity to debrief the reporter afterward. A few more lunches, a few more favors, and only then might there be a mention of a formal arrangement. That came later, said a CIA official, after you had the journalist on a string. Another official described a typical example of the way accredited journalists, either paid or unpaid by the CIA, might be used by the agency. In return for our giving them information, we'd ask them to do things that fit their roles as journalists, but that they wouldn't have thought of unless we put it in their minds. For instance, a reporter in Vienna would say to our man, "I met an interesting second secretary at the Czech embassy." We'd say, "Can you get to know him? And after you get to know him, can you assess him? And then, can you put him in touch with us? Would you mind us using your apartment?" Wow. You're right.
Crazy.
Formal recruitment of reporters was generally handled at high levels, allegedly, after the journalists had undergone a thorough background check. And the actual approach might even be made by a deputy director or division chief. And so on some occasions, no discussion would be entered into until the journalist had signed a pledge of secrecy. The secrecy agreement was the sort of ritual that got you into the tabernacle. This is, yes.
What word choices? Wow. Secrecy into the tabernacle.
Right? That's incredible. A former assistant to the director of Central Intelligence telling Bernstein that.
Wow,
right?
That's incredible.
So
it's interesting you mentioned that because I went through Shackley's book. Well, Shackley's book is mentioned in the book I just read, right? The Twilight of the Shadow Gunman. But his Spy Master, My Life in the CIA. And they learned they didn't have to buy newspapers anymore. They used to buy the newspapers. No, like we just get our message into print through the stringer, the staff writer, or the editor. So they didn't have to. They infiltrated these organizations. That was the best, and that's what happens in like COVID and stuff. Like, I mean, you want to talk about like a mockingbird to the present, like the CIA and Department of Defense propaganda. But they just insert themselves in the CDC and those. Which ones of those guys are CIA agents? Which one of those are foreign agents?
Right.
Like, I think that's how dark it gets, like the infiltration
I do too.
And stuff. Yeah.
I think this is Operation Lockstep, right? It's like it seems to be all pervasive. And why would it not be? Right. Why would the goal not have been to embed yourself, infiltrate at the foundational level of each of these industrial facets of society? It makes all the sense in the world to me that would of course be your modus operandi. How would you, at least your ultimate goal, would be to essentially have total, full spectrum dominance, like we just mentioned,
information, total information dominance, centralized 100%. In the CIA. Like amazing. That's why Bush becomes president. That's why all of his little sidekicks are Bush associates, because he had all the information. So he's operating Clinton, his son, and Obama, who's a freaking relative. He's a 10th cousin. And his dad, Obama's grandfather, worked for the CIA. And it's like, I think that Sotoro, I think they're talking about Judge Roy Brown is saying that Sotoro was a CIA asset, which makes perfect sense. But they're all like, he was a hitman. Like his dad was. There's a whole book on that CIA's involvement in the communist overthrow, Sukarno, the most brutal crap stuff you imagine. When the Muslims decided to get rid of the communists, it was just a slaughterhouse, like hundreds of thousands. They said that in East Timor, when they killed the communists, there were so many dead bodies that the entire bay was filled with bodies. You could have just walked over the bodies over the bay.
Oh my God.
That's how bad it was. Like surreal, like
insanity,
just like totally insane slaughter. Like that's how bad it was.
My gosh, man.
But these guys all knew. That's what these guys might have gone insane. Like Wisner stuff is like, they knew the bloodshed and the stuff that was going on. Like just crazy stuff.
Yeah,
crazy programs. Exactly. The burden, you have to be like a lizard or a shark. That's what Dulis's nickname was, the shark. Like you have to be like a shark to like not have an emotional response to the kind of power and potency. And I mean, these guys, I always say this, but like they attained the power the Nazis wanted.
Yeah,
the Nazis like, we want world control, Deutschland über alles, but they were kind of confined to Europe. But the CIA did something where they like controlled so many countries all over. So many people were installed. Saddam Hussein and all these other characters. And Mossadegh was kicked off, and then Pahlavi.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So like,
yeah, that gets interesting. Actually, the Covert Action Information Bulletin, they came out with some interesting points made about the Mossadegh coup, and basically just, completely exposing the CIA involvement, and it was amazing.
It's called Operation Ajax. It's 1953. Yeah.
Insane.
And he's kind of like Ho Chi Minh in a lot of ways. He just wanted autonomy and self-determination for his own people. And guess what? You have oil. You don't get that.
That ain't happening.
It's the same thing. Allende. Allende was the original 9/11. It's 9/11, 1973.
Oh my gosh. You know what is crazy about that? Is that there was a call that, remember I mentioned Doug Caddy earlier, right?
Yeah.
He there's this call that he received, that he says he received this puzzling phone call from the Robert Mullen, the head of the Mullen and Company, who owned the lucrative CIA cover contract. And he says that his boss and owner of the lucrative CIA cover contract happened to be in Chile. Wow. And so when Doug asked him, well, what are you doing in Chile? Mullen responded by saying, we're here to overthrow Allende. What the hell, man? So
it's just like Robert some of the Mullen, brazen boldness too. We're just going to get rid of you. We made the decision.
Ridiculous.
Kissinger, a Pilgrim Society member, right? So.
Oh yeah, and he even in early 1972, Howard Hunt, he calls up Douglas Caddy and says, "I'd like you to join me and Lawrence Houston, who is the general counsel to the CIA." He said, "I would like you to join us for drinks on the Maryland side of the Potomac River at a restaurant." He did not disclose to Caddy what the meeting was about, but when he got there, he was offered a job with the CIA. Wow. Caddy claims that this offer came as a surprise. And Lawrence Houston, the general counsel, said that upon accepting this position, we would want you to go to Nicaragua and construct and open a luxurious hotel there. And we would lure the Sandinistas leaders to the hotel and videotape them and entrap them in a typical CIA operation.
There you go.
It's just insane.
Yeah. So these operations are happening all the time. Blackmail is common. It's currency. And that's the whole thing. Even Diddy, somebody said that it's an FBI front, there's FBI tapes and who's sharing what.
Oh yeah.
It's just, the real world is a lot different than what you see on the media. There's no question about it. Anyway, we are at the 90-minute mark. It's great to talk with you again.
Definitely.
I think we kind of, we didn't even get into the modern Mockingbird.
I know. I have so much more than.
Yeah, we'll have to do a part two.
I agree.
Because I have stuff too. We didn't even get into the Joe Rogan stuff where he was talking about the DOD directive. The one that I wanted to talk about was the Executive Order 13721, which is the one Obama signed.
Yes. Smith modernization.
Yeah, the modern, exactly. Yeah. So that we can go through that. We'll do a part two, but It's Friday. I got to run, but it's great to talk with you. Tell people where they can listen to your show and find you.
All right. William, as always, thank you so much for having me on, man. I don't need to tell you again how much I appreciate you, but I meant every word when you came on Already Dead, and I had such a good time. So thank you very much, as always. And all the rest of you can find my work at the Underclass Podcast, basically anywhere. You try and subscribe to the YouTube as well, because Jose and I are trying to get at least he's demonetized. I probably will be at some point, but until that point, we're attempting to at least be able to receive super chats and stuff like that if we can. But so we have a show together as well, Jose Galison. It's called Already Dead. We do it every Tuesday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. But yeah, subscribe to my YouTube at the Underclass Podcast. If for any reason you're in a place where you could support me or throw anything my way, I'm very grateful for absolutely anything. And the best places to really support me would be Buzzsprout or Patreon. And both of those are at the Underclass Podcast. And follow me on Twitter as well, at UnderclassPod.
Thanks, so I'll include all of your links at in the show notes so people can just click through. And again, it's Austin Picard of the Underclass Podcast. And we covered just a surface level. We could have gone, literally talked for 5 hours on Operation Mockingbird. So thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it. Stay there.
Ba-da. Bada boom, sold.
Huh?
Just sold my car on Carvana. Dropping it off and getting paid today.
Already?
What, you still haven't sold yours? You told me about it months ago.
Is
the offer good?
Oh, the offer's great.
Don't have another car yet?
I could trade it in for this car I love.
Come on, what are we waiting for?
You're right.
Let's go.
Whether you're looking to sell your car right now or just whenever feels right, go to Carvana.com and sell your car the convenient way. Terms and conditions apply.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.